This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. All right, guys, we're going to keep this Botching Afghanistan series going, but we're going to do it with a new guest that you're not familiar with in terms of my podcast, and that is Mike Ritland. So Mike Ritland is a guy that we are going to have on our podcast, and we're going to do a proper podcast with him later on down the road. But Mike Ritland is a retired Navy SEAL. He is an expert dog handler, and that's kind of his business, but he's also a best-selling author. He's written a lot of stories about his military career and how we should respect a lot of the dogs that are used in these areas. I was on the Mike Drop podcast, so that's how a lot of you actually found our show, is I got attacked by one of his meat missiles, and then I went on his show to talk for about 3 hours. We had a really, really good conversation. But again, we are going to have him on, I believe it's in about 4 or 5 weeks, to talk about a new book that he has coming out. So we're going to do the normal fanfare with that. But we're going to go ahead and get into the story here. And guys, I really loved his perspective on a lot of these things, because Mike is not one to mince words. And again, there's kind of a language warning on this episode for any of you guys that maybe have sensitive ears around, or little kids or something like that. Mike just talks and I just let it go, and I don't edit out anything. I want people to give me their honest feelings. But I really enjoyed his perspective on a lot of different things, because yes, he was on the ground in the Middle East, and he's lost friends, and he knows Gold Star families, and he serves a lot of those people even still today. But again, I really, really dug his opinions. You should check it out. Obviously, you're about to, because you're going to listen to this. So guys, without further ado, let's get into it. All right, Mike Ritland, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know that we're going to be doing a more proper show here on down the line, but the circumstances just predicated having this conversation sooner. It's insane what's going on in Afghanistan, and you know what it's like on the ground there. You know what it's like on the ground for those people. And so, as with everybody else in the series that we've done, I just want to kind of back away from the mic for a second to just let you say what your initial thoughts are as to kind of what you're seeing and what's currently going on in the country of Afghanistan.
Sure. I appreciate you having me on and asking me what I think. In a word, heartbreaking is probably the single most apt descriptive word that I can pick to convey what I feel and just how it seems like things are going there. And for a number of reasons. I think that there's the obvious one of seeing, what we spent 20 years there doing essentially was erased, at least one-dimensionally or as kind of a singular view, which is tough to watch, to see, thousands of our men and women lose their lives to set up certain mechanisms in that country to be a certain way, and then they all just vanish in a matter of days is tough to watch. It's also tough to watch to see just the amount of bloodshed that continues there, and the rapid exchange of kind of culture going from, essentially a free democracy within reason, going right back to the way that it was pre 9/11. I would argue that it's actually more dangerous than 9/11 or pre 9/11, because they have a lot more experience. They've got a ton of our equipment. They have infrastructure put in place and recruiting pipelines and things like that. So, their capabilities could possibly be more. And I think the probably the single biggest reason why I find it heartbreaking is that it didn't have to go down that way. I know a lot in the media on the administration side are saying, we plan for every contingency, and I would just say, well, bullshit, because if that was the case, it wouldn't be happening. I mean, I don't know who listens to that and thinks, they did everything they could, or saying that like the previous administration agreed to this deal, and so it's out of our hands. Like that's a chicken shit response too, and that there's about 40 other deals that the last administration signed and agreed on that they've reversed, in a matter of days. That they didn't want, and so I think it's just such a feckless and spineless way to conduct yourself. I mean, as a president, it's your job to legitimately say that it's my responsibility and the buck stops here, not with a caveat, not with a but, not with a and. Right. I mean, just plain and simple, like it's your responsibility. I mean, if I hire somebody that does something wrong, ultimately that's my fault. Yes, there's free will and there's people's decisions to make a choice, but that's the big rub with being in a leadership position is that you take ownership of what happens, and you can't have it both ways and talk out of both sides of your mouth the way that they're doing. I also think from kind of a more strategic or tactical side, what we're seeing right now, and I don't know when this will air, but um, you've got tens of thousands of citizens, about 10,000 American citizens, and tens of thousands Afghans that are supposed to evacuate and come here that are scattered all over the country. And so it's like, well, we've got the airport secure. You didn't, and that's why there's people hanging on the planes and coming off, as well as the simple fact that the fact that that wasn't planned for and they didn't have some mechanism to get those people out of there. I think you're going to see over the next couple of weeks some really, really horrible stuff because, the Taliban, there's, 100,000 plus of them scattered all over the country, a lot of them centered around Kabul and the airport right now. So you can have the airport secured and, congratulations. But how all of these people are going to get from where they're at to that airport, I don't see how they're going to do that. I mean, the Taliban isn't going to just say, "Oh, you're American, yeah, come on through." Like they're going to cut their head off, So, to me, the fact that those things weren't planned for, weren't accommodations weren't made, I think just speaks volumes to how out of touch they are. And I think that the administration, not unlike past administrations, plural, I think they're all guilty of it to a certain degree of surrounding themselves with yes men and echo chamber folks that tell them what they want to hear. But I think this is on a next level as far as that goes, or this wouldn't happen. And you can hear it even in press briefings where whether it's the president or the press secretary or the Department of Defense or what have you, um, I mean, they're all just kind of saying the same thing, and it kind of reminds me of the Emperor's Clothes story, and then it's like you can watch what's happening, and they're saying, "Well, that's not happening," or it reminds me of like back in when Iraq. Back in the first Gulf War, there was that Baghdad Bob that was like, or maybe it was, I'm not sure exactly when it was, but the press secretary for the Iraqi regime was like, "No, we've got America right where we want them, and they're on the run, and it's going to be rivers of American blood here shortly." Like while they're getting the shit kicked out of them, and it's just like that's what that seems like to me is that these people in these upper echelon of government are just I mean they're blinded by their own arrogance, and it's frightening and sickening. The one I would say silver lining though that and I know for a lot of veterans out there and just a lot of patriotic folks in general that probably look at this and think to themselves, uh, what were we there for? What did we accomplish? Did our troops die in vain? And most people say no, they didn't. They did their job and they volunteered. But I'll take it a step further from a more kind of not just trying to make somebody feel better about what happened there, but legitimately is that um, in interviewing Dr. James Mitchell, I learned a lot in reading his book called Enhanced Interrogation about what intelligence was gleaned from the interrogations of a lot of the masterminds of 9/11, including Sheikh Khalid Mohammed, as well as Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, rather, as well as a number of other higher ups in Al Qaeda that basically all corroborated the same thing, which was 9/11 was executed on the principle or the expectation that we were going to respond in similar fashion to the last 10 years of Al Qaeda attacks on America, which was basically let's lob a few Tomahawk cruise missiles to some training camps and call it a day. They were not expecting us to launch a full scale invasion of Afghanistan and knock them on their ass. And in most cases, it was if we had known that, we wouldn't have done it the way that we did it. And so the two things that I think came out of the last 20 years in Afghanistan that we as a nation should be proud of, and if there's one thing I can say, is absolutely the case, and why it was worth doing what we did there as long as we did, is that number one is that we prevented another 9/11 from happening for over 2 decades. Number two, and this is probably the most important thing for the long term and internationally, is that not just Al Qaeda in Afghanistan and Taliban and associated parties. The entire world knows that if you bring an attack here to this country and attack civilians in a scale with which they did on 9/11, that we will use absolutely every resource in our arsenal to come to wherever you're at and spend as much time as it takes to hunt you down and fucking kill you, and completely redesign your entire culture if that's what it takes to to prevent it from happening. And so, to me, that's something you can't put a price tag on, because the reason it happened in the first place is because they assumed we wouldn't do that. Now there's absolutely no question. A couple of other things I think that are important, though, is that for us to learn from this, not that we didn't already know this, we should have learned this from Vietnam and a host of other conflicts we've been in, but is that, nation building is a mistake, a huge mistake. Trying to set up democracies in countries that aren't democracies is a mistake. I think it's an arrogant and painful mistake on our part to assume that everybody wants to live in democracies, because they don't. I mean, Afghanistan is a good example. Yeah, there are some people there that do, and some people that are heartbroken and pissed, rightfully so, now that that's not happening. I mean, there's kids now that are 20 years old that were born that never knew what Afghanistan was like prior to 9/11 that are in college. That's going to be a sobering fucking wake up call for those folks. But the reality of it is that whether it's Afghanistan or parts of Indonesia or the southern Philippines or North Africa, the Horn of Africa. I mean, there are a lot of places in the world where they want to live the way that they live, or enough people there want to live in that manner to where it's not going to change, and you can't force it on them. I mean, the fact that it's taken a week to go back to 7th century AD essentially in terms of how they're conducting themselves tells you enough to where that's clearly how at least collectively they want to live. Again, I know there's plenty of people that don't want to live that way, but not enough to fight enough to change it or to leave or to what have you. So those again I think are important things for us as a nation to consider, and not make those same mistakes, and one that we should have already learned. But
Yeah, Mike, you brought up a lot of great things there. Obviously, you mentioned all the contingencies. Biden gets up there and says, "Oh, we thought of every contingency." It's like, "Oh, so you planned for the airport to get overran. You planned for people hanging on to the landing gear into the sides of the plane. Oh, I didn't realize you planned for that. That's
yeah,
so interesting." And of course, that's not something that they would ever admit to. One thing that I did key in on that you said is that obviously they didn't expect us to come back at them with the full force that we did after 9/11 to basically make them pay for this. But I'm curious as of right now, because again, we heard the narrative forever that, oh, we can't still be in these endless wars and these wars are never going to end. And how much blood and treasure is it going to take? Even though we hadn't taken a casualty or a death in warfare in Afghanistan in 18 months, it wasn't like, and people were talking about it like it was World War II or something like that. But do you feel like the American public has that kind of an appetite? Because I've thought about another 9/11, quote unquote, a lot. And I'm wondering, like in 2021, 2001 is an unrecognizable time period because of how we're living now, because of
sure.
the cultural revolutions and all that. Even if there was another 9/11 style attack, do you feel like it would be that same garnering moment for the entire populace that, no, we're going to get behind the government and we're going to send our boys and girls over there to fight for us? It's like, do you feel like it would be the same?
100%.
Okay.
100%. And here's why: is think about what your life was like on September 10th, 2001. It was about like it is now. People fucking heads buried in the sand, worried about shit that didn't matter. And it took getting the hornet's nest kicked over the way that it did for the entire country to collectively come together and decide, what, fuck this, we're going to pay them back. So it's still there. It's just, unfortunately, that adage of, strong or good times create weak men, that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the cycle that we're in right now. We're in we've had good times long enough to where, we're worried about what pronouns to use, and who should be able to piss next to who in a bathroom, and if you don't call me by the sex that I identify with, and that's a microaggression, and you should be arrested for it. I mean, it's laughable. It really is. I mean, if watching the last 6 days doesn't put some of that in perspective, then I think you're I would say legitimately crazy. If you can't watch what's going on and realize that 99% of the shit that goes on here that people argue and fight and bitch about is just absurd, laughably absurd, then I think you're out of your mind, because I can tell you, like right now over there, if you think any of that shit is on anybody's radar, it's not. People are trying to not get killed and set on fire and heads cut off right now, not all the other just societal bullshit that takes place here, where people are complaining about everything, But further kind of to your question of do they have that appetite for it? I think it's also important to remember, kind of taking a few steps back to where we were, say, 30 days ago, is that we were in a position where, like you said, the last casualty was February, I think, of 2020. It's been about 18 months since a combat casualty happened. We were in a position to basically say, hey, we have just enough contingent there between troops and other bases and capabilities within an hour or two flight to where the Taliban wasn't attacking us. Now, if you think that it was because the deal that Donald Trump struck, that they were just, well, that's what we agreed to, so we're going to do that. As you can see, what's happening right now, they don't stick to their fucking word. The reason why they didn't attack for the last 18 months and didn't do shit, even with 2,500 troops, is because they knew what would happen if we did, or if they did. Mm-hmm. And so similarly, again, I will go back to that was the deal that was made and it was out of our hands, is such a crock of shit. They didn't give us their permission for us to invade their country the first fucking time. We don't need their permission. We were already there, and it would have been very, very simple and easy. And this isn't Monday morning quarterbacking. To me, this is common sense for anybody who's ever spent any time in that region. Frankly, even most people that have never stepped foot in that country, that just have some shred of common sense, can look at that and say, this is working out pretty well. It's keeping things at bay, and we should just stick with it, because we have almost nobody there in terms of real numbers. 2,500 troops is a very, very low footprint, but we had invested enough time and enough ass whippings over there for them to understand what the alternative was if they start messing around. So to change that, I think, is dumb. It wasn't an endless war at this point. The war's been over, essentially, and we've been just maintaining a finger on the pulse, if you will, and making sure that, cats away, mice will play isn't taking place. Well, now the cat just flew. And now the mice are completely overrunning the entire country, and we're doing jack squat about it. And so it didn't need to change. Biden could have very easily said, you know what, I know I said we were going to pull everybody out. We're going to hold what we got indefinitely, and if you don't like it, we can go back at it. So to me, that's just the deal. You're also at a point where, if you had to say, we'll kick it up a notch and take the gloves off too, and stop caring about collateral damage, we can go that route too. We as a nation have done that in the past, i.e. World War II, where, we were facing a similarly dedicated enemy, and it took those types of measures to say, hey, this isn't a good scenario. It's a lesser of two evils, and we're doing what we have to get the point across, to say, you're going to stop fucking with us, or you're going to pay with your life. So we could have gone that route too. It's just, I think, I know our current administration is, they've got their head in the clouds. That's the reality of it. I don't want to make it about politics. It shouldn't be, and it really isn't. This is very simply, you're in charge. You made a series of really, really shitty decisions, and now this is what you're seeing because of it. I do think some of the military leadership is absolutely to blame too. When you've got General Milley, or Miley, I think his name is, kicking books off of the reading list and adding white fragility, and going to and talking to Congress about white rage, and saying that the top three terrorists, these are the top three terrorist threats to our country, are refusing COVID vaccinations, questioning COVID protocols, celebrating 4th of July and other, I'm sorry, between 4th of July and 9/11, celebrating 9/11, or having 9/11, party celebrations, what have you. And then lastly, but certainly not least, is questioning the election results. That's the Department of Homeland Security's top three terrorist threats, as per them. I mean, it's absurd. And so if our military would focus less on social projects and proper use of pronouns and white fragility and transgender experiments in the military, and just focused on one simple thing, which is let's stay good at whipping some ass. I don't think we'd be in this position either. So it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, you wish the focus would be on that and being as lethal as possible, because again, you have these people that are in the Pentagon talking about climate change in a militaristic context. It's like, what are we going to do? Shoot nukes at the moon, or like try to like get rid of sun rays using different types of BDUs? But something that you came up, which is kind of undergirding all of this, is that you were over there actually dealing with these people day in and day out. You were dealing with interpreters. You were dealing with informants. You were dealing with people that were helping you. And those are the people now that the Taliban are apparently going door to door and executing these people and their entire family tree, right? Yeah. And so for you, that's one of the most damnable things for me as I look forward into the future is if we do go back, not only are we going to have to take back these cities, house by house, block by block, grid by grid again, which I don't know if we have the stomach to do that, but who's going to help us? Yeah, because if you're these people on the ground, why in the world would you trust the Americans? They just left.
Yeah, you wouldn't. I mean, and you can't blame them. I mean, would there still be some people that would help because the alternative is getting their head cut off? Sure, but it's going to be much more difficult, and it paints a pretty terrible picture. To the rest of the world for any future things that happen that that America is not going to have your back, and it's just going to make everything moving forward much more difficult.
Well, from your perspective, because you've kind of seen these things play out, I've just thought to myself, we're not going to see the true ramifications of this one micro decision by Joe Biden for decades. I feel like this is going to be playing out for a very, very long time. But from your perspective, what can the American public expect to see in the next 12 months? What would you think?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't subscribe to or necessarily agree that that now all of a sudden overnight that the world is far more dangerous. I think it's impossible to argue that it's more dangerous. I don't think that it's now all of a sudden 9/11 is going to happen in 3 months again. I really don't think that. Does that chance exist? Of course it does. But again, I'll revert to the last 20 years of they understand that, and that's why they've kept their distance the way they have over the last few years, is because they knew what the alternative was. They also feel confident enough in the inability of our government at this juncture to do anything about it, for them to feel confident and comfortable enough to do what they're doing, which is alarming. It also tells you a lot about, again, how they feel about Joe Biden. I mean, to me, that's the one thing, like all politics, bullshit media aside, the rose-colored glasses that each political party is guilty of seeing their own guy from, is that, the litmus is the other countries, and you're seeing that right now, and that's impossible to argue. I mean, they're doing what they're doing right now because they don't respect America being led by who is in charge right now, and I use that very, very suspect. It's not that he's in charge, but I mean he's the figurehead of the government and the country, unfortunately. And what they're doing right now tells you everything that you need to know about how threatened they feel and how serious they take him. They don't. You saw the same thing with ISIS, and Obama in his second term, is that absolutely no respect for American power with those people at the helm, because they're not doing anything about it. I mean, there's a reason why. And this isn't about right versus left or whatever. This is just solid internal leadership, international leadership versus not. Is that the litmus and the mirror reflection of how it's going and what the world thinks of you is how they treat you, how they interact with you. And right now they're bitch slapping us because that didn't happen when Trump went into Iraq and stomped the shit out of ISIS in a matter of months and killed Baghdadi. I mean, that they disappeared. You stop seeing all these refugees, piling into Europe and causing problems. You stop seeing, Al Qaeda and ISIS affiliates doing lone wolf attacks all over Europe and threatening to do them other places. All of that shit stopped. Why? Because he handled business the way that you need to, the same way Ronald Reagan did, and with the carry the big stick attitude. And so, It's really unfortunate. Like I said, it's heartbreaking to see it. Ultimately, I pay attention to it. I'm watching and I'm keeping tabs on it. But I try not to let myself get consumed with it because I think it's counterproductive. I mean, I focus on the things primarily that I have the ability to do something about, and so that's what I spend most of my time focusing on.
So you obviously talked about the difference between, how the Trump administration with all their warts, but how they treated foreign policy and warfare versus an Obama or a Biden administration. So from your perspective, do you feel like it's going to take because you said you didn't want to make it about politics, but obviously it is about politics and you know that just as well as everybody else does. Is it going to take another red tie in office for us to kind of have that attitude? Or was Trump a unique figure? Was Bush a unique figure? Is DeSantis going to be able to do it? Is, Nikki Haley going to be able to do it? Like, what are your thoughts there?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it has to be a Republican to do that. I think there are people on the left, that I think would have handled it better than Biden. But to me, ultimately, it really boils down to one key thing: is that you either have your country's best interest in mind or you don't. And the reality of it is that right now the current people that are in office seem, based on their actions, and I strongly believe that. And one of my favorite adages is, "What you do speaks so loud I can't hear what you say." Is that I don't give a shit what you say behind a podium, what your mouthpiece says, whatever. What you're doing tells everybody everything about what your intentions are, what your priorities are, etc. The fact is that from based on their actions, they care more about optics and aesthetics and what people are going to think of them, than they do, what their own country is having to go through. And the irony of it all is that, you kind of lose both ways that way. When you do everything trying to appease everybody, you end up pissing everybody off. And that's what's happening is now, like, their own party isn't even backing them. I mean, it's surprising to see people who, I mean, just no matter what the guy did, would not hold him to task, and hold him accountable, that are really slamming him and questioning everything that he's doing right now, which is at least refreshing to see. Because one of the things I talk about in the book that's coming out is if you can't hold yourself / your own party to the same standard you hold the other guys to, then you're a useless hypocrite, and you're no better than anybody else. So it is nice to see that there's some balance there.
Absolutely. And as we wind to a close here, it's kind of hard not to end with these types of questions, but you've alluded to this, and I know you well enough to pretty much be able to know your answer, but I want you to give it to my audience. And so it's kind of a two-part question. The first is, do you regret going over there and risking your life considering how this has ended up? But then also parlay that into your personal message, Mike Ritland's message to Gold Star families that have either lost dads or brothers or spouses, or their family members came home without their limbs or busted up in the head or something like that. So go ahead and just kind of speak on those two things.
So just to throw you off, I do regret it, and I have no message about that.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, I 100% I don't regret it, and this really ties into the message for Gold Star families: is none of us do, or I mean, I can comfortably say I speak for everybody that I know, at least, is that none of us do, and there's one simple key reason: is that, for myself and for most veterans, even the ones that don't come home, I think, that we all do what we do because we want to do it. It's a voluntary force. We chose to be there. We know, what we're signing up for and what the risks are that are involved. And there's no place we would rather be than, with our brothers in arms doing, or getting our hands dirty on behalf of Uncle Sam for our country. Having said that, it's easy, having been in Iraq, it's easy to look back on it now and be like, fuck, was that a mistake? Like, why did we really go, and you can ask yourself all those questions, but to me, none of that really matters. And the reason it doesn't matter, and this would be my message to Gold Star families, is that, all of us volunteered to hand over a blank check up to and including our lives payable to the United States government when we sign on the dotted line and stand there with our right hand up, given the oath. Past that, it's up to our elected leaders to decide what's what our usage is in the best interest of the country, and they decide where we go and who we fight and how we do it, and all of those things. But for us, it's just very simply, I'm volunteering to serve my country in whatever capacity my country sees best fit for me to do so, and that's it. And that's a very noble and honorable thing to do, and it's serving a greater good that most people frankly aren't willing to do, and that should be enough, for everybody to hang their hat at the end of the day and say, I'm proud to have volunteered and rogered up to trust and love my country enough to let them send me to go do whatever the fuck they thought I should be doing, and I did it to the best of my ability, and I came home, and I'm proud of doing that, because that's really all that matters. I mean, you can't control any of those other things. You can control whether or not you volunteer or not, and that's it. So and whether or not you give it your all and serve honorably, and things of that nature. So, again, I don't view any of it in vain for all of those reasons. But
All right. Well, Mike, we are going to have you back on here before too long, and we are going to have a more proper interview where we break down some of your books and everything. But I definitely wanted to get your opinion on all this very quickly. But is there anything else you want to let us know before we let you go?
no, just for all of us out there that see that and are pissed off, again, just keep your chin up and realize the big picture of the good things that came out of it. I mean, at this point, there's nothing we can do right now to change what's going on right now. The people that are in charge, are the ones pulling the strings, and all we can do is try to find the best out of it, and maintain a good attitude, and don't let things like that send you on a spiral downward that that causes problems. So
All right, Mike, thanks for coming on.
absolutely.